time there? What time is that?
7 o'clock on the dot.
All right. Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, April 19th, 2016 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. If you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's been a while since we've met, and let me remind you to please be sure your microphone is turned on, green light, and speak into the microphone for the record. And Mr. Carteret, quick question. I sound like I'm in a barrel. We have a new sound system.
We have made some changes to the sound system since our last meeting in here.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Interesting to note. We'll call roll. Commissioner Anderson.
Present.
Commissioner Berenson.
Present.
Commissioner Boyd.
Present.
Commissioner Crane.
Present.
Commissioner Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Meiske.
Present.
Commissioner Sarsfeld.
Present.
And Mayor Turnbow.
Present.
And Commissioner Faulkner is present. We not only have a quorum, but we have the full commission. And welcome,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. We have no personal appearances scheduled this evening. 2 items in the consent agenda: minutes, acceptance of minutes from our March 15th, 2016 meeting, and case number 16003, Edgewater at Creekmore, 5th final plat. At your convenience, I would entertain a motion either to accept the consent agenda, or I suppose you could do separate motions, but since these are on consent, there's no further discussion on them unless a commissioner wants to move them off of consent for additional discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Anderson.
make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, please.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Crane to approve consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. I've got 8 in favor.
And I
Any
will
opposed?
abstain at
And,
this time.
Mayor Turnbow abstaining. So minutes and case 16003, Edgewater at Creekmore, 5th final plat are approved. Good night, Mr. Warger, and thank you for coming. Okay, we'll move ahead through old business as there are no cases, and our case this evening, which does require a public hearing, is case 16004, annual review of the growth management plan. And Mr. Carteret, if you would start by presenting that case to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Back in 2013 is when the Planning and Zoning Commission did adopt our current growth management plan. So it's been 3 years. When we adopted the plan, one of the items we included was a direction for the Planning Commission in April of each year to do an annual review. And that entailed staff going through, some of the decisions and records that the commission had over the previous year, and looking at preparing a written report for the commission to consider as part of your annual review. So this is the 3rd time we've done the annual review. Of course, we did one in 2014, 2015, although last year's was closer to June when we did it. But back on schedule this year to get it done during April. And so staff, using a format that should be similar or familiar to the commission, we used a similar report last year, prepared a short written report kind of highlighting activity that's occurred through the growth management plan over the past year. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through the report fairly briefly, but highlight a few of the items that I think are worthy of discussion, and then just open it up for comment discussion. And as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, this is a public hearing, so we will need to have that aspect of the meeting when I get through the staff report here. So when we look at assessment of activity, one of the things we try to look at is making sure that the plan isn't falling behind, what's considered to be modern planning practices. So the two specific items that I see that repeatedly came up in the planning world over the past year, I've kind of identified here. And one of them that Raymore has had a lot of involvement in, but a lot of communities are seeing this as a item that they need to seriously consider, is the changing demographics of our community. It really will have a significant impact on communities across the country. So as the commission has heard several times already from me and from others, looking at the Community for All Ages initiative just really is going to be important for us. And we've taken a very active role in that. We've gone through, if you would, step one of the three steps we're going to go through to be recognized as a Community for All Ages, because understanding the demographics is going to be important for this commission. Kind of hand in hand with that is the changing housing needs that we have, facing our community. It goes hand in hand with the aging of our community, where we need to make sure that we are providing housing for individuals of all ages. So we need to make sure we're providing, affordable housing. We need to make sure we're providing housing for, individuals to live, on their own, for individuals to age in their own home. Need to provide housing, types for families to take care of other family members that may want to live on their property. So that gets to our accessory dwelling units that we've allowed in some of our residential areas. But just the changing dynamics of housing is something we're going to be wanting to address. One of the items I think you'll see coming forward would be a discussion on universal design. As a community, a growing community, we're building a lot of new homes. We need to make sure that those homes are adaptable in years moving forward, that they have universal design elements, meaning that they have the ability to be changed over time for an individual to age in place. That if they should become, for accessible reasons, they need to have maybe wheelchair bound, for example. We need to be able to ensure that home is adaptable for them to stay in that home. The time to do that is when you're a growing community and we're building all these new homes. Let's make sure that they're adaptable homes, and we're not stuck with homes that people really can't age in place in. So it's probably an idea that you'll see coming forward sometime this year. And we probably also need to consider our accessory dwelling unit ordinance and maybe expanding that a little bit into other residential areas. Just something for us to discuss. And then regarding kind of future land use, the residents, the citizens did vote in support of the GO bond that did pass in April. Have a couple of significant road projects as part of that. These road projects will open up some areas for development. We talk about Kentucky Road, an extension of Fox Ridge. We're going to be extending Sunset. We're going to be extending Johnston Drive. So those projects do open up some areas for new development, and it's something that we want to keep in mind over the next few years, what impact that will have. The Fox Ridge Drive extension to Dean Avenue, one of the intents of that is to increase traffic flow going to the new interchange. We have a new interchange. We just need to increase traffic flow through that interchange. We need to get volume down there. Without volume, we just can't get businesses interested in that location. So that will, we think, enhance some of the traffic movement on the south side of the community. So those are kind of as far as the planning trends itself. As far as the progress on implementing some of our goals, just highlight a few of them. I think the first one that I identified in the report dealt with a new process that the city manager instituted regarding economic development. We've gone to more of a team approach in that when we do look at economic development opportunities, there's a team of senior staff that now work together on economic development projects. The mayor becomes an important part of that team as well, as we move forward through the discussion phases with whether it's a business, an industry that's looking at the community. We really wanted to be a little bit more of a as far as an approach to make sure that we are meeting the needs of individuals interested in our community from the very beginning. So we get the parties that would have some involvement together at the table at the very beginning. And so that's kind of the team approach, but that directly goes to a couple of our goals that I've identified them in our economic development opportunity goal that kind of outlined here in the report. On our quality neighborhood goal number 1, we do the annual review of our property maintenance code. That's a continual item of importance to residents, is making sure that properties are being maintained in the city. So we do that annual review to make any enhancements that we can with that code. The construction of the Ridgeway Villas, there in the Legends development behind Culver's, does provide an important housing opportunity for residents that will be moving into our community. That is a federal tax credit project. There are already individuals moving into those units. They have quite a waiting list. So it's obviously a popular development in our city that is meeting a need for certain residents. The park board, and council continue to work on enhancements at what used to be kind of referred to as a farmer's market area. It's really TB Hanna Station now. But we've made several improvements over the past year. We also recently, as a city, purchased property for the First Baptist Church. So you'll see removal of a home on that property and a continual expansion of the TB Hanna Station area. We also will be enhancing some of the sidewalk and parking areas around that area. Again, because it's just a part of our community that is getting a lot of attention from residents, with the farmers market being there, and we have significant improvements planned for this year for that area. Another important element that came forward, and through the approval of the GO bond, we'll have some enhancements done, will be the community facility located in Municipal Circle. Early on was referred to as the Annex Building. It really is a community meeting place, meeting space. That project had been funded already by the city. You heard Mr. Fearborn in his presentation to you on the CIP talk about that project, but with the approval of the GO bond, that building will be expanded, and there'll be a lot of site enhancements done as part of that project. This is really kind of becoming the community focal point of Raymore, will be the Municipal Circle area. But that directly goes to community connectivity goal number 1, which was develop a common place for community gatherings. So we'll have indoor community meeting space. There'll be an outdoor component with that project. Then we also have the amphitheater, which was part of the GO bond, and Hawk Ridge Park. That also goes to meeting that goal. So really, I'm not going to go through each one of these items, but you see there's several other ones where we've had very positive activity in meeting the goals of the GMP. And then as far as the plan's ability to support city council goals, what's really interesting there is, I know many of you were involved in the community conversations that we had, that at the meetings in February, we were meeting up at the Eagle Glen School and kind of going through a visioning process for the city. But as you go through, sitting through the meetings and listening to where we ended up with at the last meeting, the comparisons with the items that came out of that planning process and our GMP, they're very closely knit. If you really think about it, look at some of the items that the public was stating in the community conversations, we had identified as one of our goals or objectives in our GMP. So the similarities are encouraging, and that consistency is kind of the norm here in the planning efforts that we've been taking. But what I wanted to indicate here was some caution with the Planning Commission this evening on our GMP, and let's let the city strategic plan process that the council is leading kind of go through the steps and see where that, where that kind of ends up with over the next, 6 months. And then it gives us an opportunity to take what council has decided as the goals and kind of make that comparison back to the GMP. So the annual review process tonight, we're kind of looking at what's been going on in the past, but there's a lot going to be happening over the next few months that we want to let go through the motions, if you would, and then take a closer look at it as that plan kind of comes to fruition. In looking at, other items, other issues that are going to be relevant moving forward, one of the master plans we probably need to take a close look at is our transportation master plan. That was done last in 2010. Again, with some of the new roadway projects going through, it will change some of the traffic patterns in our community, but that's an item I think we continually need to make sure is up to date. I mentioned last year, it continues to be true, the amount of prime leasable commercial space is limited in our community. And you'll hear our economic development director talks about this. You think about the vacant spaces we have in some of our commercial areas, it's pretty limited. The Willowwind Shopping Center, which is one of our older shopping centers, used to have quite a bit of vacancy, and they're down to 2 spaces. So pretty well full. Even the Pine Street Center, I think our original shopping center in the community, limited on what space is available for new businesses. So it's something that we keep in our mind as we're planning new areas for development. And then one of the other items I identified, Mr. Zerr can certainly speak to this, and I'm sure it'll come up in his report of council activities, because we had discussion last evening on this, but something that the Planning Commission will be addressing in the future will be sign code. Our favorite topic. I know we all love to talk sign code, but there was a fairly significant Supreme Court decision that was handed down in late 2015 that really could have some impacts on sign codes throughout the country. As I told council last evening, fortunately, I think Raymore was ahead of most communities in how we were addressing aspects of our sign code, really temporary signs. The court decision that came through really dealt mostly with temporary signs, but through the work of the commission with Mr. Zerr's help, if you remember, back a number of years ago, we really did address the issue of temporary signs. And so our sign code is very closely aligned with the Supreme Court decision. I think that says a lot about, what we have done as a community and trying to stay ahead. But there's still some things that need to be tweaked. And so at some point, we will need to do a UDC amendment to take a look at some of those, some of the areas that do need a little bit of work. Council gave some direction last night of some things they want us to do with the sign code regarding temporary signs. So you'll be seeing that come forward in the next few months. As far as, again, recommendations, I do want to, again, kind of limit, hopefully, our discussion on what amendments we want to do pending council's work on the strategic plan. I think that really is an important item. We want to move forward with the Community for All Ages program. That will have some impacts on the GMP. And one of our goals there will be to create a specific master plan for that initiative. And then we continue to want to look at the city's land use ratio. We haven't had a lot of rezoning requests come forward, looking at new multifamily projects or new, if you would, commercial or industrial areas. But it's something that we need to really pay close attention to is the ratio that we have, and really focusing in on the multifamily aspect of that to make sure that what we have planned as far as new land area for new development is the appropriate mix that we want as a community. So we continue to need to do some study of that area. Really, the only suggested change that I have it's really minor, but on our one of our maps that we have included with the GMP is our tax incentive, our financial incentive district map. with the recent council approval of the project on the former Dean home property there at 58 and at Dean Avenue, they did create a tax increment financing district for that property. They created a community improvement district, so that needs to be reflective on our maps. We try to make sure when somebody gets one of our growth management plans that it's completely up to date. So we'll make that minor modification of that map.
So if you
That's
would,
really the only
Mr.
suggestion I have.
If you would, Mr. Carteret, remind us, so some of the maps that are included by reference are actually owned or controlled by another board. Is that one under control of Planning and Zoning Commission?
It really is, only because it just illustrates where council has made
It's
decisions
a
to
compilation
create
of,
districts.
yeah, so it's a compilation of council actions. Okay.
That particular map is.
Okay.
But our open space map comes directly from the park
Right,
board.
right. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes.
With this map, I don't think so. We're just trying to illustrate
Okay.
what other,
Right.
groups or commissions or councils have adopted regarding those districts, so.
Right. Does
Yep.
Heather have the master copy of that
Yes.
map then? Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we'll insert into the
Sure.
GMP. So that's
Okay.
the one change that we will
Yeah.
suggest be made.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
Anything
that
else?
really does conclude my
Okay.
quick summary of the annual review.
Well, that said, before I forget, let me open the public hearing on case 16004, annual review of the growth management plan. And thank you, Mr. Carteret, for that summary. If anyone in the public would like to speak on this case, Councilmember Hubach, please come forward to the podium, and if you don't mind, you can give us your name for the record.
I'm here in my capacity as, I'm Charlene Hubach, and I'm here in my capacity as a city council member. And I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about the, is it done there? So
Yeah,
I can
we
hear it
can-
on one side and I'm hear it on the
No,
other.
we're
Okay.
hearing you okay here, I believe.
Why I'm here tonight is that section 340 of the chapter 89 of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And this is what it says. The Planning and Zoning Commission shall make and adopt a city plan for the physical development of Raymore. And that's what I'm here. There's several areas that I think need to be looked at, and I want to know what your plans are having to do with that. One of them has to do with mixed use. If we are going to do anything with town center concept, we have to be able to have mixed uses. And that means having residences living above businesses. And also it goes on to talk about blighted areas, and we have two blighted areas that I know of. One of them is Willowwind, and according to this, you have the right to replan on Willowwind. The other one has to do with the area by the post office down to Perkins. That's an area too that is very blighted, and I'd like to know if you all have any plans for the physical development of that area, because I think that's very important. When people are coming from the west going east, they pass through these two areas, and it tells them a lot about the city of Raymore when they see blighted areas. And they don't see our fine homes, they don't see some of the nice businesses, but they see these areas that are covered up with weeds and just terrible looking. I think they're ugly. So that's why I'm here tonight, is I want to know what your all's plans are for the physical development of some of these areas that are not developed now, because you're supposed to plan the future of Raymore, and I'm going to be living that future, and I want to know what it is your plans are. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councilmember Hubach. Would anyone else from the public like to speak?
I think I'm it.
I know, but I still have to ask. And seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on case 16004 and open the floor for discussion, comments, questions, et cetera, from the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Anderson.
I guess my comment actually coincides to Councilwoman Hubach's regarding with the passage of the bond issue and I guess the work that's planned. And I think he had recommended that, at least from a planning and zoning, that we kind of defer to the strategic plan here. So can you kind of give me some background in that? Because, do we kind of sit back as a planning and zoning and just kind of wait for a strategic plan, or do we kind of meet together and kind of agree on what the plan is holistically?
It's going to be a little bit of a combination of the GMP and the strategic plan, because they really are trying to achieve the same end goal, if you would. So that one of the good things about the community conversation discussions was the involvement of P&Z members. Because you heard, as individual members, you heard a lot of the comments that are being said. And with familiarity with the GMP, some of the comments being mentioned there were, yeah, we've already got that in our GMP, or we need to add that to our GMP. The only thought process, I don't like postponing, us moving forward as a commission. But what I want to do is be cautious that we don't go in a different direction than what City Council is leading us in that process based upon the input they're hearing from the residents. So I want them to go together. And so I like the position that the GMP is in and where we're at right now, because I don't consider it outdated, because I think the community conversation meetings kind of supported what we have been planning for over the years. Because we went through a pretty significant process of gathering input when we did the GMP.
Beforehand, absolutely.
But I do want to, at least get the council goal discussion started before we go too far in changing something in our GMP and reacting to something that we maybe don't want to react to yet.
So do we have an opportunity to kind of level set, maybe during a work session or council work session, to make sure that, this is what we have, this is square one, let's kind of work together and make sure that we're in alignment?
Yeah, that would be a great suggestion to, as we go through that process, to work with council. As we've done joint work sessions before,
Absolutely.
just try to see, well, where are we at, and what can we do together, and make sure the GMP is aligned with the council goals and vice versa. So that I know council, when we started the community conversation process, was afforded, the opportunity to look closely at the GMP when we start the process. So I know they were, with Councilmember Moorhead kind of being a proponent of that, because he was so involved with the GMP, saying, hey, make sure we take a look at this document as we move forward with our council goals. So they go so hand in hand.
Sure. I guess another comment to Councilwoman Hubach is, specifically the Willow Inn Shopping Center. Every time I pass that, I cringe, and I want to use the word as an opportunity once again. Yes, there is, 2 open areas there, but again, that's kind of, at least in my eyes, that gives the, the owner more, not willingness to upgrade the property. So I think, again, as a city, we have an opportunity to make sure, or push that owner, or that to say, hey, we need to do a lot better. So not just, we have businesses and we had that 80% capacity or 95% capacity. I think we need to be more proactive in how we address those tenants and those, quote unquote, those blighted areas. All right. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, of course.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Mayor Turnbow.
From the work session that we had last evening, some of the same things were brought up about the master plan update. Jim refers to it in his written report here about the changing demographics. And with the bond passages and the development of those infrastructure roadways and the amenities that are going to come for our parks department, the look and feel of the community is going to change over the next couple of years. Just last night, they produced a schedule for some of these projects so that we'll have, once they issue the bonds and the funds are obtained, and we can begin the process of moving forward with the building of these projects, we will see the demographics, just basically the look and feel of the community change. The community center behind us will add luster to the circle to allow us to begin to maybe even consider this as a town center spot, which was part of the Reimagine Raymore conversation. to have an identity for Raymore. It could be, it could not be. We have, basically a blank slate out there off of I-49 and North Cass Parkway to work with. And so some of the things that Mrs. Hubach brought up, like mixed use, are important for us to include in the master plan. I've not read it. I do know that I've had a discussion with Mr. Fearborn and Mr. Carteret and listened to what they've had to say about it. So I do think the planning and zoning has a lot of work ahead of us in order to look at that plan, consider what is going to happen over the next couple of years with regard to the improvements that are going to occur, and include that in our thought processes as we move forward with maybe amending the growth plan. And so it's really important that we have a blend of ideas and information from the council, from the P&Z, from the different staff members that work in those areas to include economic development, because I do know that he's working toward redevelopment of some of the mentioned areas. And so I think conversations are certainly great to start here today. We can't really do a lot of heavy lifting here, but I think a lot of great ideas have been posed for us, and a lot of work is ahead of us as we begin to watch our community grow culturally. It's going to grow infrastructurally wise with the new roadways and passages for egress and entrance into the city. So we're going to see a lot of changes. I don't know how much this group can really point a finger at what it needs to do right now without seeing some of these things come to fruition and then begin to understand the complexities that those items bring to us and how we move forward from that. So while the conversation is great right now, I'll use a metaphor that I heard last night, is that we kind of let off the accelerator a little bit and kind of coast and see what's going on for the time being, so that we can kind of take it all in. I think right now we're on a downhill course, which is a good course because we're building momentum. But what I think we have to be very careful is to not run off the road here and crash and burn because we've got so many things that are going on right now. But I do think that this group that I'd like to be a part of in the future would be looking at this master plan, because the demographics have changed in the last 3 years. They were changing as we were making that plan. I was part of that process too. My wife and I were part of that process too, and sat in on some of those committees. And so I do know that even from my knowledge of what was being presented to us in 2012, things have changed. So it's we are moving in that direction. I just think for us to make a determination tonight about it is premature, but it's a great conversation to think about for the future. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Well, while it's quiet for a minute, first, I want to agree with what Mayor Turnbow said. I think you made several very good points, and I was thinking something along the same lines. I'll probably say it differently, but in past years, I think the city was probably more reactive. We were smaller. We were working on on a smaller scale, and in a lot of cases, we were waiting for a developer to come in with a plan and with money to implement that plan, and then we would analyze whether that plan fit with our vision or whether we needed to revise the vision because we liked the plan. In today's time, frankly, things you presented a moment ago in reviewing current events, Mr. Carteret, the city has a larger population, a larger budget, and is taking a more active role in actually implementing things. The road extensions, I'm going to probably call it the wrong word, but the what we were calling the annex, the community center, I'll get it right eventually, and TB Hanna Station, clearly city is becoming more proactive. So I think it's appropriate for the Planning and Zoning Commission to kind of rethink some of our planning, but I think, as Mayor Turnbow said, I think we are typically more about planning, visions, front end, than we are perhaps about implementation, because frankly, we don't have the budget. We don't have direct control of the funding. We can certainly recommend it to City Council, but ultimately, the implementation, I think, is probably more driven by City Council and, again, still developers with plans and money to spend.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Crane.
I agree with the Mayor, and we've done quite a bit of planning up front, and you talk about mixed use. When we redid the UDC, you know, we've got things in there now that will allow for businesses and residences to occupy the same framework. We have a deal now where we have the ability of different kinds of multi-generational housing in the same place. So I think that we've done some things up front that will allow us to do that. I just don't know if we're in the position to go full bore on a redevelopment plan and a forced redevelopment plan. So, I mean, all in all, I think we're sitting pretty good with the UDC that we have now in planning for these changes. So, we need to kind of sit and see what the City Council wants us to do.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Mayor?
Chair, if I could, we did have conversation. We did have conversation, at least with a couple of the council members, with regard to the potential of establishing some kind of a budget for the P&Z to possibly get in a facilitator to begin the approach to the growth master plan, to see how it interacts with the plans that are going on over the next 2 to 3 years with everything that's just happened with the bond issues. So I think that there is a potential for open conversation with the council to talk about a potential budget that would allow us then to possibly bring in professional facilitators to help us look at the growth management plan and include what the council's strategic plan is, and also include what the bond issue configurations are going to change for us. So over the next several months, there may be that conversation that planning and zoning might have somewhat of a budget to do that. I'm talking out my shorts right now because I don't know that for sure, but there did seem to be a little bit of open-mindedness toward that, so that we can kind of start edging in that direction for looking at the growth management plan. And Jim, did you kind of get the same feel as I?
I did very much, sir. And one thing that council's already been progressive with is, since we adopted the last GMP, each year they do set aside funds on an annual basis to build up a little bit of a reserve to help with that. We may need some additional funding, but we are thinking ahead that we know the GMP is a living document that needs to be reviewed and updated, and so hopefully we can look towards, you know, that kind of project.
Right. I think on the one hand, you know, when we talk about mixed use, granny flats, things like that, we've had some of those in place in code for a while. We've had a few, I'm going to call them isolated incidents or isolated where someone has taken advantage of those. I don't really feel like we've gotten a lot of experience yet to build on and perhaps set a future direction. So on the one hand, I'm a little cautious. I'd like to get more experience. I'd like to, for instance, see that there's a genuine need and a genuine willingness, because again, development takes money, and it's not money that we control directly. We can influence it with TIFs and SIDs and zoning and things like that, but we still aren't ultimately the ones implementing it. So then to contradict myself, when I think also as fast as things can move, the economy is slowly recovering. Raymore has continued to develop, and I think we're still probably the leader in Cass County. And, you know, the last thing in the world you want to do is put off making plans and then find out that it happened helter-skelter and you're completely out of whack. So I'd like to be proactive. I just don't want to be too far ahead of the headlights. Other commissioners? Yeah. Mr. Zur, I'm thinking we have one input from Mr. Carteret to update the, I'll get the name wrong, but the TIF districts, SID districts. Tell me again the proper name.
Financial Incentive District map.
Financial Incentive District maps, thank you. So we have one input from Mr. Carteret that I think makes sense to me. That's firm. I think we have at least a lot of discussion from those who've spoken that we have the visioning sessions at Eagle Glen. We're waiting. I certainly want to make a coordinated effort and not go off completely independent. So I think this is clearly something that we will revisit throughout the year and not just actually wait till an annual review point, right, Mr. Carteret?
That is correct, and I think the suggestion of doing a joint work session with
Oh, of
council,
course.
probably in the summer months, is appropriate.
So, Mr. Zur, to me, what might be appropriate, I'm just suggesting, what might be appropriate at this time would be a motion from the commission on case 16004 to update the growth management plan to include the, I'm going to get this wrong again, financial incentive, to update the financial incentive map to include the Dean property and otherwise to accept the plan as it exists and not necessarily part of the motion, but knowing that we can update again through the year as we get further input and as it seems more appropriate. So that's just a suggestion. Mr. Zur.
I think that is an excellent suggestion. I would note, of course, you have had the annual review and report, so I think I would include in there a reference that you are accepting the annual review and report subject to Mr. Carteret's addition of the, or amendment of it with the proposed map, and I'm not going to get the map correct either.
Yeah, but that's all
The
right.
financial incentive map showing the appropriate districts for TIF and otherwise.
Well, the emergency deputy commissioner Zur, that was a well-stated motion. It's too bad you can't legally make it, but hopefully that guides someone else. Any thoughts? Well, any thoughts, further discussion? Yeah, Commissioner Anderson.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the, do we need to do the case or just?
No, to approve the update, or,
Okay, let's go ahead and reference the case 16004, the annual review of the growth management plan, inclusive of the financial incentive district mapping update as noted by Mr. Zur. Would that work? Okay.
this is our,
It's
right,
just
this is
ours.
our case.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. So I have a motion by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Berenson, to approve case 16004, annual review of the growth management plan, and accept the plan, including Mr. Carteret's recommendation to update the financial incentive map contained within the plan. Is there any further discussion on the case? Yeah, that was just a head scratch. Okay. If you were at an auction, you just bought it. Okay. So, motion as stated, all those in favor, raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. So I have 9 in favor, therefore none opposed and no abstentions. And I'm quite sure that as the year goes on, we'll have more discussion on the GMP. All right, Mr. Zur, I think it's time for City Council report, if you would present that to us.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to do so. It's a pleasure to be able to be before the Commission again and to participate in the review of the GMP. I have a couple of things that I can update you on with regard to City Council reports. First and foremost, I would note that in the review that Mr. Carteret has provided to you after the cases for tonight, he has included references with regard to the March 14th, 2016 City Council. This was mentioned earlier this evening with the approval of the Highway 58 and Dean Avenue Tax Increment Financing Plan, as well as the Community Improvement District at that particular location, which might be of interest to you all here on the Planning Commission. Also note in there the approval of the real estate purchase agreement for the 201 South Adams Street, and I believe you'll find that is part of your Hannah development, Hannah Station development for expansion of the park over there from the church. And finally, you have a approval of a 1-year extension of the North Cass Plaza preliminary plat, which was granted a 1-year extension by the City Council. Those are the items from the March 14th meeting that would have been of interest to you. I also have a March 28th meeting and a couple of items from that for your consideration. Again, the final approval of the 58 Highway and Dean Avenue Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Agreement on that night. There was also approval, and you will, as a city, be hearing more about the out-of-state vehicle sales tax ballot question that's going to come up in the future. That was approved to be placed on the ballot here in the short future for the out-of-state sales. That's something that is a ballot issue that's being heard by a number of cities around the area, and that will become of greater significance as the next election cycle comes around. Looking through, I don't think there's anything else from the March 28th meeting that had a critical interest for you all. So I'll move on to the April 11th meeting. I do have a couple of agenda items from the April 11th meeting of your interest. First and foremost, there was a regular meeting at the April 11th City Council, and at that time, the oath of office was provided to our newly elected officials, including our new mayor, Mr. Turnbow. So it is a pleasure to have him, and he has made the determination to participate on the Planning and Zoning Commission. It is a pleasure to have him, and we'll give him a roundabout education on planning and zoning issues at this point. Despite his prior involvement with the city, I don't think you had much opportunity to be involved in development and planning and zoning, so this will be a great opportunity for that. After the regular meeting for the City Council on April 11th, there was also a special meeting, and at that special meeting, a couple of items of interest for you. Actually, maybe not much. Approval of the GO bond, which came up this evening as part of our discussions, and the expansion and developments that will occur within the city based upon the funds resulting from that GO bond. And I think that covers it there. There was also a work session last night, which was alluded to by Mr. Carteret as well. That work session had a discussion with regard to signs. I am happy to answer questions for you, although I anticipate we will do that at a greater extent when the sign review comes up. Basically, the overview of the case was temporary signs that were related to content-based regulations, and the Supreme Court struck down a city's proposal to be able to identify different time frames that political signs, ideological signs, and event signs were able to stay up. As Mr. Carteret indicated, I believe that we are in good stead with our current sign code, and that we will not be making major overhauls to it, but that it will be something, this case gives us the opportunity to go back in and do another pass over it and identify anything that we may need to bring in alignment with that case. I do not believe there will be much, though. We also, I think that's about all I have for work session. So that covers you on about 3 or 4 different city council sessions and opportunities, including last night's work session. I will answer any questions, and obviously, Mr. Turnbow was there. Mayor Turnbow, if I missed something or you think there is a critical thing that I should point out, please feel free to chime in.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yeah, of course.
I wanted to ask, Jonathan, do you have, after the input from the council last night, do you have in your mind what you might propose to this group for looking at, for approval? I mean, I can't imagine it being a long, drawn-out process because we are so close with our code. Do you have that direction well enough down from last night that you could give something to this group?
I believe that Mr. Cataract and I took copious notes during the course of last night's meeting. You will find information with regard to temporary signs. There will be comments made, or we will look at temporary signs in right-of-way, and then there's also a potential with regard to enforcement items for signs that are illegally posted that might be part of our discussion. So I believe we do have a good understanding of that, and again, I will be working with Mr. Cataract to make sure that we fill those out. And today we did not have an opportunity to compare notes from last night, but I know that both of us were diligently writing throughout the course of this council's discussion.
Right. And I guess the bold approach would be to have you all work ahead of time and perhaps actually bring a case to the commission that we might approve or might modify and approve. On the flip side, the timid approach would be to have a work session, talk it through with us before we spend any more work trying to draft a revision to the ordinance. But what I'm hearing suggests that, you know, I'd say take the bold approach in this instance if we're not that far off. Certainly, you know, we want to review it, make our recommendations, but I don't see why you couldn't go ahead and work that as time permits and bring it to us at a future meeting.
I think there's some validity to that analysis, mostly because I think you're going to be viewing this from a more of a legal standpoint than a, you know, what do we want to see as our city grows type of thing. This is going to be dependent upon the results of the case.
Well, I think we may be viewing it from a what do you want to see in your city. You may be hopefully viewing it from a standpoint of keeping us out of legal trouble, because we really don't want to waste city money on a lawsuit over some technicality.
That is exactly correct. And I don't know if Mr. Cataract has any additional input on that one, but I think that those were the two main ones that I heard, which was temporary signs and where they can be placed, and then whether or not there's any provisions within it for teeth for, hey, what if it's a continual basis violation that we need to address? So.
Well, and I like the idea of putting you to work ahead of time so that we have a legal opinion and recommendations when it comes back before us.
Mr. Cataract was far too modest on his own behalf last night during the work session opportunity. We will be working very closely as a team, I am sure.
Course.
So
I expect that. Okay, thanks. Okay, so let me collect my wits and regroup. Did we end the city council report? Sounds about right. Mayor Turnbow, anything else to add?
No, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Cataract, if you'd be so kind as to present the staff report and planning pipeline to us, we're ready for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just several items real briefly, but I'll start with the planning conference that was held. Commissioner Pfizer and I attended the planning conference. I'll let her speak if you'd like to about, you know, your reactions to the conference. Quickly, my reaction, it was one of the better conferences as far as sessions. Mr. Zero will be pleased. I attended a couple of the law classes, planning law classes. One specifically on sign, but there were other law classes. And then Mr. Fearborn would be happy to hear I attended some ethics classes to make sure I stay on the straight and narrow. So those are actually classes that I have to attend as part of licensing. But really, we're very informative. One of the more interesting ones, and I've got pages and pages of notes you can tell that I took, but one of the sessions was specifically titled, "So you've adopted your plan is finished, what's next?" Kind of where we're at, you know,
Yes,
where we've been
that's
at after our GMP was adopted. So I found that to be pretty informative of how to take our action, our objectives and our action steps and actually get them accomplished and make a difference. So Overall, a very good, very good conference. They've kind of condensed it. They've shortened the overall time frame over the last couple of years to, it really starts on a Saturday and finishes first thing Tuesday morning, but still a great learning opportunity. Next year, the conference will be a little bit later in the year. It'll be, I think, May 5th to May 8th next year. It's in New York City. But again, an opportunity, hopefully will be there for a commissioner to be able to attend and participate in that. Commissioner Pfizer, I know we didn't get a chance to talk about the conference, but what were your thoughts?
Well, first, thanks for letting me go. It was a lot of fun. And I did learn a lot of things. It was very inspiring. I think one of the first things I learned was that a small town is basically 100,000 people or less.
Oh, wow.
And I was kind of like, do these people know what a small town is? but and a few other people apparently thought so too, because they're kind of looking at each other like, what? But it was still useful. And one of the events that I attended was the opening game for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I wanted to go there because I had actually worked on that baseball field 20 years ago, and I'd never seen it, so that was exciting. But when I got there, I was wearing my Royals World Series champion hat, you know, because you have to. And I went and sat down with all these planning and zoning people, and they were all from New York. They were all Mets fans. And they took a vote on whether I could sit there or not, and they decided that I looked pretty harmless, and so they said I could. And they actually were very, very nice, and they were all like, oh, you got to come next year to New York. And I said, well, you know, probably someone else will get a turn, but if not, I'd be happy to go. And I think the last thing was that I went to, one day there was a series of like planning commissioner type seminars, and a lot of things were, some of them were about problems or how to deal with unruly crowds, which I don't think we have that here. And some people had meetings that went like 10 and 12 hours long. They had hundreds of people there to comment and make the same comment over and over. And a lot of them talked about, you know, dealing with people on the commission that they, you know, personalities that clashed a lot. And one woman talked about it a lot, and I began to think that maybe she was the problem and not the other people. But one of the things that I took away from that is that this commission gets along very well, and I think everybody's very respectful of what everybody has to say, and you know, nobody's talking, and you know, people are listening when people are talking, and so I was really kind of grateful after some of these that I am on this commission, because it is really nice, and it makes me feel proud to be helping and a part of the city. And so if someone gets to go next year, I think it's great. It's like you'll have a great time and wear comfortable shoes.
Thank you. Well, and we'll look forward to leveraging your experience through the rest of the year and on. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Cataract?
Yeah, thank you. And a few other items. As we look at our calendar, I know our next meeting coming up is May 3rd, and we don't have any cases scheduled for that, but we have a number of cases that are, if you would, in the pipeline. So we see a lot happening, you know, the next couple of months. You saw Mr. Warger here, who was representing Cooper Development. They're becoming very active this year with new phases. We'll be seeing another phase of High Point, another phase of Westbrook coming forward this year. Actually, an extension of 163rd Street. If you're familiar with the Creekmore development, it'll actually connect with with Creekmore Drive. Kind of to provide a little bit better emergency access and construction access in the subdivision. But things are going well in that particular development, so we'll see projects moving forward. We'll be seeing site plan activity for the Dean property. We talked about the TIF of the CID. Well, they do have tenants lined up for that development, and so one of the tenants wants to be open by November 1st, so that means they've got to get moving on the site. You may have seen the home is slowly being dismantled. I noticed tonight the windows are gone, and it's pretty much been cleaned out, if you would, of the inside. The family's been able to take a lot of the items that they wanted out of the home, and so it's getting ready for demolition. You'll see demolition happening fairly shortly. It has changed ownership, and so there will be some salvaging of materials by the city out of the building, some things we would like to repurpose specifically for our community meeting facility behind us. So some of the wood and some of the bricks from the home, et cetera, will be repurposed. But they will be moving forward very quickly with the site plan. So that is something, of course, that you'll see and have an opportunity to review. We also will have the site plan for the community building. That has to come through the planning commission and other improvements as they move forward. The recreation facility and recreation park will have to come through the commission. And plus, we have another number of other activities that you'll be seeing over the next couple of months. So, you know, we've been pretty quiet for the last year for us.
Last several years, actually.
It really has. I see a little bit of an upturn,
Yeah.
so that's a positive thing. And but with that being said, we don't have anything for May 3rd, so I don't,
Right.
unless we have some.
I'm trying to remember, it really hasn't been that long since we've been through what we might call annual commissioner training. I don't think we need to do that this early. Mr. Zur, do you happen to recall? I do lose track of time. Well, so we could go one of several ways here. We could leave the meeting open pending a sanity check from Mr. Zur, or we could take a chance that my memory's not too far off and simply go ahead and cancel May 3rd and plan to meet on May 17th.
I think that would be my
Yeah,
recommendation.
do any of the commissioners have any objection to canceling the May 3rd meeting? Okay, I think if you would, I think we'll go ahead and cancel May 3rd. We'll meet on the 17th. And if you wouldn't mind, just either you or Mr. Catarat look back and see, we can look ahead at a potential meeting to schedule annual training. We've got at least one new face on the commission, probably several others that I'm losing track of, but seems like a reminder never hurts.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll cancel May 3rd.
Very good. And then one last item. There are a couple of items I think for the planning commission will, to take a look at over the next couple of months. One of the emerging changes from a technology standpoint is some of the telecommunication companies looking for micro telecommunication facilities where they're doing not doing the big cellular towers, but doing more relay towers on existing utility poles.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of a little bit more effective system for them. Mr. Anderson probably know. I know he knows a lot more than I do about this.
Probably.
I'm using very generic terms, but it is something that our code really doesn't address yet. Something we should look at. Not saying we're for or against, but I think we need to understand the technology and make sure we properly address it in our code.
So would that involve Mr. Eanes as well? That sounds like engineering.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely would, because we're dealing with right-of-way and.
Right,
and,
true, okay.
One of the projects the city's been working on is KCP&L currently owns the power poles.
Okay.
I think you may have heard that the city is looking at purchasing the power poles from KCP&L. It certainly would be a cost savings for the city, but then it becomes our utility and something that
Right.
we need
Did
to.
we buy the street lights?
We haven't yet. We're in the process.
It's still in conversation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, but it's moving forward. Then a second idea, and Commissioner Pfizer kind of pointed me to some materials on this topic, but something that we've read about in the news, et cetera, is the use of what's referred to as little libraries. You may see some individuals or businesses, et cetera, set up a small little library, front yard. Some communities have placed regulations in place. Perhaps it's something we just need to look at to understand it. Is there anything, Commissioner Pfizer, you want to comment on that, or?
I just know the Arts Commission has discussed the idea a little bit, and I know Silver Lake area has talked about wanting to add one or in front of the clubhouse, so don't know if other people are interested or not either, but those have both been brought to my attention.
I don't know if there are any in our community. I haven't seen any.
There's actually one in, one of the, oh, I'm sorry. Forget, I'm quiet. There's one, I believe it's inside a church, whatever the white church is on 58 Highway. The white church, I guess.
I'm blank, east or
And
west?
it's on the, well, it's on the south side of 58.
Beacon of Light or Beacon of Hope?
It's, I think it's next to the Lutheran church. I want to say it's a Methodist church, but I really don't know.
Okay, White was throwing me. St. Paul's United Methodist is just west of Bethlehem Lutheran.
I believe it's that one,
So,
but I could be wrong. But I
I'm
know
not
there's
sure.
one like listed in
now I'm confused.
the little library
But, yeah.
directory or something, but
Okay.
it's inside the church, I
Right,
believe,
okay,
so.
that very well may be.
But just something for us to,
Interesting. Right.
make sure we understand, and, yeah, I'm not saying we need a regulation, we just understand it as, something that, we want to be familiar with, and if it's something we want to allow, to make sure that our code allows that. It's
Always better if we discuss it before somebody comes into us with a
Yeah.
pressing need, and then we have to rush.
Exactly.
Sure.
So, yeah,
Good.
try not to be so reactive,
Right.
so. Other than that, I think that is really the only items that I
Yeah.
was going to bring up tonight under staff comments.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Carteret. And I'll open the floor once again for public comments. And if no one from the public wishes to comment at this time, I will open the floor for commission member comment. And it's been a while since we've had a meeting, so I'm not sure who I want to pick on first, but,
I'll volunteer.
oh, Commissioner Anderson, thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do want to extend thanks to staff. I know previous meetings I have not said thank you, so don't want to imply that I'm not grateful for all the work that you guys do. I want to extend a congratulations and welcome to Mayor Turnbull. So welcome and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Anderson. I think I'll just keep on moving down the line. Commissioner Berenson?
No comments tonight.
Yeah, okay, thank you, sir. Commissioner Meiske?
No comment.
Oh, a shy bunch. Commissioner Bowie?
No comment other than welcome to the mayor. Glad to have you. Hope to shake your hand soon.
Well, I'll count that as a comment, thank you. Vice Chair Pfizer, and thank you for telling us about the annual conference as well.
You're welcome. Yeah, actually, I'm going to make a comment. I'm just going to talk a lot tonight. Again, the Arts Commission, I have like an in with one of the Arts Commissioners, so I get a lot of information from them, but one of the projects they're doing is called a pop-up art project, where you can take an Adirondack chair and paint it and decorate it, and then there's kind of a competition and everything. But they're trying to get people to do it and put them around the city in different places to kind of generate interest. And I think it would be a nice idea if the Planning and Zoning Commission had a chair. So I'm all for organizing it, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. I'll be sending everyone emails about it, and you
Can we put a
either
commissioner dead sound asleep in the chair?
possibly.
That may not be a great idea.
But anyway,
End up painted.
I just thought I'd bring that up, that's
Yeah.
something that
Cool.
looks like a fun thing to do, so.
Let's talk about it again.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see, moving right along, Secretary Crane?
I too would like to welcome Mayor Turnbow to the commission, and I can't tell you how excited I was to hear that our sign ordinance is up, because I think as Jim and Chairman Faulkner and I battled through it past 11 o'clock at night the last time,
Place, yeah.
I'll be looking forward to a very short one.
Yeah. Well, pardon me for butting in, but yeah, when we talk about signs, clearly, that is something we've worked on periodically, and I think driving down 58 Highway, I take some pride in the efforts that we've made to clean up and make the city a little more visually appealing. And so I look forward to continuing that trend. Commissioner Sarsfield.
Just welcome to the new mayor. I was really surprised that he got it. I'm being honest. I have no ties with any. I'm coming out of state.
Where's my time delay button? Oh, that's funny.
But I'm glad he does have it.
Thank you.
I'm thinking, when my wife says, "Who is this?" and I had explained to my wife who you were, because we're not locals, and I said, "Well, he's this, he's this, he's this, he's this, he's this," and she goes, "Oh." And she says, "How many other people know him?" I said, "There's a few." And I said, I didn't tell her what to vote, but she did tell me she voted for it.
Well,
Tell her thank you.
I'm kidding, of course, but considering that commissioners are all appointed by the mayor with recommendation and concurrence from city council, it's been nice working with Commissioner Sarsfield.
My yeses are yes, and my noes are noes, and you know what?
Yeah.
Us Navy people just stick.
Mayor Turnbow? I'll
Yeah,
turn the floor.
I just want to say thank you for the warm welcome. I'm looking forward to working with the group. I let the council know last night that I intended to stay as active as I can with the P&Z. I know that they're going to talk about whether or not they're going to appoint a member from the council. I suspect it'll stay the same. I'm not speaking for them, but it'll probably stay the same makeup, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody.
If I can add my 2 cents, we have some flexibility in code, and so regardless of council's decision to have a council liaison, I certainly hope you'll stay on as a member of the commission.
Thank you. Thank you.
Definitely.
I know we're all probably anxious to get out of here. I won't go long on this, I promise. Mayor Turnbow, I don't know that you've yet gotten a subscription to the APA's planning magazine. I'm sure you will.
Mrs. Hubach has already recommended it.
Okay, well, so this isn't really a pitch for you. This is a comment to the rest of the commissioners. I'm just a little OCD. I usually feel compelled to at least scan this cover to cover, and of course you can accuse me of cherry picking. There are always a few things that jump out at me, but in this particular issue, which is April 2016, actually back on page 34, what I had highlighted is a section of a larger article and kind of a series of things, planning practice. And this particular thing I wanted to call to our attention is called Create the Place. And it goes with a lot of conversations that we've had. Some, I'll say, going back to comments that people have made about, well, how do you know when you've arrived in Raymore and when you've left Raymore? And so I'm always a little bit touchy about that one. And so I'm simply going to quickly excerpt a few things from this Create the Place. Feel free to read it yourself. I'm not planning on forcing it down everybody's throat, but placemaking is important because it attracts people and makes developments more memorable and successful. People watching can be enjoyed from a bench under a group of trees, a sidewalk cafe, the edge of a fountain. And I'm going to paraphrase now, but these environments pay a dividend in terms of increasing the number of people that visit, and the longer they shop, the more money they spend, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a little bit of mercenary appeal there, but it goes on to say even relatively simple amenities such as shaded walkways, parallel to storefronts, also through the middle of parking lots, are important. Safe, attractive, convenient footpaths. And of course, these are things that I think Raymore always has been conscious of and has actually been leading. So I simply noted that article. On the next page, planning practice, there's a whole series of examples from around the country called gateway visioning case studies. And again, gateways, how do you know when you've arrived, when you've left Raymore? And the final thing on the previous page, 33, the main heading is called Reinventing the Strip. I always like the pictures, but basically when I think about Raymore, you know, I can still remember when downtown Raymore was around on Washington Street, and clearly that has changed a lot. But, you know, when I look down 58 Highway, it's a bit of a strip. And, you know, with a few offshoots, but none going more than about a block each way from the strip. And I think this article, the way I read it, was basically talking about moving, and this sort of addresses Councilmember Hubach's comments about the commission taking a longer view of things. But it's talking about moving away from a linear strip down the highway to what I'm going to call clusters, things that we've actually talked about in sessions long past, like the intersection of J Highway and 58, and things that haven't necessarily materialized. But I particularly, and that's under the major heading called Flipping the Strip, I particularly point that out. If you still have the magazine, if you haven't read it yet, worth your time, food for thought. That's really probably all that I'd want to say, except, you know, Commissioner Anderson stole my thunder, but as always, Mr. Carteret, Mr. Eanes, and Mr. Zur, without your support, this commission would not be able to function, or at least certainly not function well. So thank you for your time, and I'd note also it's great not only to have a quorum, but to have the full commission here. So I know it takes time out of our lives. And public. Councilmember Hubach, thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Our public may be small, but they're significant. Having said that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I think it was Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Boye. All those in favor, raise a hand, please, and we'll make it legal. 9 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Thank you.